I never imagined my life would twist into the kind of story strangers whisper about behind closed doors. My name is Layla, and I am 32 years old. For most of my adult life, I carried myself like a survivor, quiet, determined, always trying to hold my pieces together after the world seemed intent on shattering them. I thought I knew pain, but betrayal has a way of carving deeper wounds than loss ever could. It began with the job that was supposed to be temporary. I wasn't a nanny by trade, nor was I someone accustomed to luxury estates and guarded iron gates. I was just a woman scrambling for rent money, picking up odd jobs to keep from drowning in bills and memories I couldn't erase. When I first walked up the long driveway of the Whitmore mansion, gum stuck to my elbow apron still stained from my last shift at a diner, I was already bracing myself for humiliation. But humiliation turned out to be the smallest part of what that house had in store for me. The twins Max and Leo were chaos wrapped in 6-year-old bodies, bright, mischievous, and unbearably lonely. Their mother had died suddenly, and though no one spoke of it aloud, grief hung in every hallway like a heavy curtain. They hadn't laughed in months or so, I was told. But within minutes of meeting me, they locked me in a room with their father, Ryan Blake, the billionaire CEO, whose name filled financial newspapers, a man whose gaze could freeze a room colder than marble floors beneath his feet. He looked at me like I was an intruder. In a way, I was. But something happened in that accidental imprisonment. The boys laughed a sound they hadn't gifted the world since their mother's funeral. And for reasons I didn't yet understand, Ryan didn't fire me on the spot. He let me stay. At first, it was small moments, me tucking the boys in with silly dinosaur debates, or teaching them songs my grandmother once sang to me in Spanish. Then it was the nights where Ryan lingered longer at their bedroom doors, watching them sleep peacefully for the first time in 8 long months. And slowly, I saw the cracks in his armor. The dark circles he tried to hide behind his coffee, the way his jaw tightened whenever he passed the closed door at the end of the hall, the room that belonged to his late wife. That room was sacred. And one reckless day, my curiosity dragged me inside. I should never have crossed that threshold, but I did. A porcelain vase shattered in my hands, and with it whatever fragile trust Ryan had begun to place in me. His fury was like a storm breaking open. I saw in his face not just anger, but pain so raw it could cut anyone who touched it. For that was the last gift he had given his wife before the accident, and I had destroyed it. I wanted to run. I almost did. But then the boys, sweet stubborn boys, grabbed clay and glitter and created a new vase with their small, determined hands. Their innocent defiance softened Ryan's grief for just a moment, enough to remind me that sometimes children carry truths we adults bury. He didn't forgive me, not then, but something shifted. What I didn't realize at the time was that betrayal wasn't only waiting in porcelain shards, it was already woven into the foundation of that family. The betrayal of children abandoned by a father's endless meetings. The betrayal of a man who drowned his sorrow in work rather than love. And in time, my own betrayal for daring to fall in love with a man who still belonged to a ghost. But love doesn't arrive politely. It crashes in messy and uninvited. I found myself laughing with him in kitchens splattered with slime, experiments stumbling through dances in hallways turned into pirate ships, and on one unforgettable night, sharing a clumsy almost kiss under street lamps before fate interrupted with a runaway child on a scooter. Each moment stitched me closer to a family that wasn't mine. Each moment pulled me deeper into a story that would one day break me. Because where there is love, there is always someone ready to destroy it. In our case, it was Lady Margaret Ryan's mother-in-law, the boy's grandmother. She arrived in pearls and tweed, every inch of her dripping with disapproval. And the moment her eyes landed on me, she saw not a caregiver, not a woman holding a broken family together, but an intruder, a threat, a mistake that needed correcting. What she didn't know and what I couldn't admit was that she was right. I was an intruder, not just into her family, but into her daughter's shadow. And as I stood there, her disdain burning through me, I felt a question stir inside. What happens when love becomes betrayal? and betrayal becomes the only path to survival. That question would haunt me, shape me, and eventually demand an answer I never wanted to give, but I wasn't ready to face it then. Not yet. Lady Margaret made her disapproval known in ways both subtle and cruel. She never shouted, never lowered herself to vulgar insults. Instead, her weapon was precision, well-placed comments designed to remind me of my place. At breakfast, she would glance at my simple blouse and say, "The staff must be so overwhelmed. They don't even have time to iron properly anymore." At dinner, she'd watch me serve the boys and murmur, "Children mustn't grow too attached to people who won't be here long." The boys clung to me tighter whenever she visited, their small hands gripping mine as if they knew she was trying to peel me away. And Ryan, oh Ryan, he said nothing. His silence was both shield and dagger. He was caught between the woman who had given him his sons and the woman who was now keeping them afloat. And though I understood his torment, it didn't make the sting of abandonment any easier to bear. One evening, after the boys had gone to bed, Margaret confronted me directly. She found me in the kitchen scrubbing dishes with trembling hands. "You've done enough," she said, her voice calm, her pearls gleaming in the light. "They laugh now. They sleep. You've served your purpose. Leave before you overstay your welcome." I wanted to scream to tell her that I loved those boys like they were my own, that I loved her son-in-law in ways I hadn't dared put into words. But instead I stood there in silence, my throat tight, the soapy water stinging my raw fingers, because deep down I feared she was right. Yet the betrayal was not mine alone. The more time I spent in that mansion, the more I discovered cracks in the perfect marble. There were whispers of Ryan's business partners, circling like vultures, secrets buried beneath glossy contracts, shadows of debts no amount of wealth could erase. And in the middle of it all, a widower who had never truly let go of his wife, but had also let his children drift motherless and half-raised while he drowned in boardrooms. The night of the charity gala sealed my fate. I had been asked to accompany the boys dressed in a gown that felt borrowed from someone else's life. Ryan looked at me across the ballroom with eyes that lingered too long, eyes that betrayed feelings neither of us were brave enough to name. We danced once under chandeliers that glittered like stars. It should have been a beautiful moment. Instead, it was our undoing. Margaret saw us, and in her eyes, I was no longer just an intruder, I was a usurper. She pulled Ryan aside, her voice sharp enough to slice the air, and though I couldn't hear her words, I saw the way his shoulders stiffened, the way guilt clouded his face. Later that night, he told me we needed distance. For the boys, for appearances, for the memory of the woman he had loved and lost. His words gutted me. But what broke me entirely was the look in his eyes. The look of a man betraying himself, even as he tried to protect everyone else. I should have left then. I should have packed my bags, kissed the boys goodbye, and walked away before the house devoured me whole. But I didn't. I stayed. And by staying, I set into motion the betrayal that would define me. Because Margaret wasn't finished with me. She began digging not just into my life, but into my past, into the scars I thought I had buried. And when she unearthed the truth about my family, about the secrets I had tried so hard to forget, she used them like weapons. That was when I realized something chilling in that house. Love and loyalty were luxuries. Survival demanded betrayal, and sooner or later, I would have to decide whose heart I was willing to break to save my own. It started with whispers. Margaret didn't confront me directly. At first, she planted seeds. A comment to the housekeeper that she couldn't imagine how someone with my background ended up here. A hushed conversation on the phone, deliberately loud enough for me to overhear words like scandal and unfit. And then, one morning, Ryan sat across from me at the breakfast table, his jaw clenched, a folded paper in his hand. He slid it toward me. I unfolded it with shaking fingers. It was a news clipping, a story I thought had been buried years ago. My father's arrest, my family name dragged through courtrooms, smeared across headlines. I had worked so hard to escape that shadow, to carve a life of my own. And now it sat between us, black ink staining white paper, my shame resurrected. "I didn't tell you because it's not who I am anymore," I whispered, my throat dry. "I've spent years running from this. Ryan's eyes softened, but before he could speak, Margaret's voice cut through the room like a knife. She had walked in without knocking, her pearls rattling against each other with every sharp movement. "Children learn by example," she said coldly. "Do you really want her to be theirs?" I wanted him to defend me, to stand to rage, to silence her cruelty with the truth of what we had built together in that house. But he said nothing. His silence was louder than any condemnation, and in that silence my heart cracked. The boys sensed it too. They clung to me harder than ever, as if they knew I was slipping away. Max cried when I tucked him in, begging me not to leave. Leo drew a picture of the four of us, him, his brother, me and Ryan, all holding hands under a crooked sun. The sight of it shredded me inside. I had become their anchor, but anchors sink when storms grow too fierce. I tried to confront Ryan later that night, but he only rubbed his temples and whispered, "I don't know how to protect everyone." He was torn between the past and the present, between loyalty to a ghost and the fragile future we had begun to imagine. And though I wanted to scream that love isn't loyalty to the dead, it's courage for the living, I bit my tongue until it bled. The next day, Margaret struck her final blow. She cornered me in the garden, the boys chasing each other on the lawn, just out of earshot. "You think love makes you strong," she said, her voice low, venomous. "But in this family, love is a weakness, and weaknesses get eliminated." Her words chilled me more than the autumn wind. For the first time I understood she would never stop, not until I was erased from their lives. That night I made a choice. I packed my bags in silence, every zipper sounding like thunder in my chest. I kissed the boys as they slept, whispering promises I wasn't sure I could keep. And then I walked down the long marble hallway, my footsteps echoing like a funeral march. But fate is cruel. Ryan stood waiting by the front door, his face a battlefield of emotions. He didn't stop me. He didn't beg me to stay. He simply asked, his voice hoarse, "Will you hate me for letting you go?" I couldn't answer. The words lodged in my throat, trapped between fury and heartbreak. I walked past him, my silence a mirror of his own. As the gates closed behind me, I realized something Margaret never understood. Love doesn't vanish when you bury it. It transforms. Into grief. Into rage. Into the kind of betrayal that demands reckoning. And I knew even as the mansion disappeared behind me that this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something darker. I left that mansion with nothing but a suitcase, and the bitter taste of unfinished words lodged in my chest. The city swallowed me up again, tiny apartments, late-night shifts, the smell of grease and bleach clinging to my clothes. From the outside, it looked like I had returned to the life I'd always known. But inside, something had changed. Love had carved a wound in me too deep to ignore, and betrayal had lit a fire that would not go out. At first I tried to let go. I told myself Ryan was just another chapter in a book already too heavy with pain. I told myself the boys would forget me, that children adapt faster than adults, that they would grow and heal without me. But the lies I whispered to myself never softened the ache. I dreamed of their laughter, their sticky hands clutching mine, the way Ryan's eyes softened in unguarded moments. I had lost them all, not because I wasn't worthy, but because power and pride had spoken louder than love. Weeks passed, then months. Until one evening, as I left the diner with aching feet and a paycheck barely enough to cover rent, I saw a headline on a discarded newspaper. "Billionaire CEO faces internal crisis." Ryan's empire was crumbling. The very board he had sacrificed me to appease was turning on him, lured by whispers of fraud and betrayal. I read every word with trembling hands, my chest tightening not with pity, but with a twisted sense of vindication. Because Margaret had been right about one thing in that family: love was weakness. And in casting me out, Ryan had chosen strength. But strength built on silence and fear doesn't last. It cracks. It breaks. And when it does, it leaves scars deeper than any scandal. I should have turned away, should have ignored it. But I couldn't. Some invisible thread pulled me back into the storm I thought I had escaped. I reached out to an old contact, an attorney who once knew my father's case, who still owed me favors. Piece by piece, I gathered the truth. And what I found chilled me. Margaret had orchestrated everything. The false evidence, the board's rebellion, the quiet smears in the press. She had built her empire on Ryan's grief, manipulating his loyalty to her dead daughter until he was nothing but a puppet on strings she pulled. The betrayal cut deeper than I expected. For Ryan, for the boys, for myself. Because I had allowed her to win once, I had walked away in silence, and silence was exactly what she had counted on. So I made a decision. If love was weakness, then maybe betrayal could be my strength. I would not fight for Ryan's empire. I would not fight for Margaret's approval. I would fight for the boys, the only innocent souls caught in this web of power and deceit. The night I confronted Ryan, the city was wrapped in storm clouds, rain streaking down the glass walls of his office. He looked older, wearier, his tie loosened, his empire crumbling around him. When his eyes met mine, something raw flickered there, guilt, longing, regret. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered. "Neither should you," I replied. And then I laid the truth bare, the evidence of Margaret's sabotage, the lies she had spun, the strings she had wrapped around his life until he could barely breathe. His hands shook as he flipped through the papers, his face pale, his jaw clenched. "She's their grandmother," he said finally, his voice breaking. "How can I fight her?" "By remembering you're their father," I answered. Silence stretched between us, thick with years of words unsaid. For the first time, I saw him not as the untouchable CEO, not as the man who had broken my heart, but as a father stripped bare, drowning in his own failures. And in that moment, I understood love hadn't been his weakness. Fear had. What happened after that night set everything in motion. Ryan's confrontation with Margaret, the boardroom battles that followed, the public unraveling of secrets long buried. But what mattered most wasn't the empire or the headlines. It was the way two small boys clung to me when I returned to the mansion, their arms tight around my neck, their tears soaking into my shirt as if they knew I had come back, not for power, not for revenge, but for them. And yet, even as I held them, I knew the story wasn't over, because Margaret would not surrender quietly, and the deepest betrayals were still waiting in the shadows. The final confrontation came sooner than I expected. Margaret summoned me to the mansion, as if I were still staff, her voice sharp on the phone, dripping with false civility. I went not because she commanded it, but because I was done running. The marble halls were just as I remembered, cold, pristine, echoing with ghosts. The twins' laughter filtered faintly from upstairs, and that sound alone gave me strength. She waited in the drawing room, pearls wound tightly around her neck like armor. Ryan was there too, standing stiffly by the fireplace, his eyes shadowed. Margaret wasted no time. "You don't belong here," she said, her tone like ice. "You never did. You are a stain on this family's memory. My daughter's memory." Her words sliced me open, but I refused to bleed in front of her. "Your daughter loved her children, and she would have wanted them happy. Tell me, Margaret, when was the last time you made them laugh?" Her lips curled, venom flickering in her eyes. "Love doesn't raise children. Discipline does. Legacy does. And you are nothing." Ryan flinched, but still he didn't speak. My chest burned with fury. I turned to him, my voice breaking. "You let her decide everything, your business, your children, even your heart. You let her destroy me, and now she's destroying you. When will you finally choose for yourself?" For a long moment, silence reigned. Then Ryan lifted his head, his jaw set. He looked at his mother-in-law with something fierce, something final. "I already have." His hand reached for mine, steady and unshaken. Margaret's face crumbled, the mask slipping to reveal the desperate fear beneath. She realized in that moment she had lost. Not just her grip on Ryan's empire, but her grip on the family she thought she controlled. She left without another word, pearls rattling like chains as the door shut behind her. It should have felt like victory, and in some ways it did. But standing there with Ryan's hand in mine, the twins' laughter echoing above us, I knew this wasn't a fairy tale ending. Betrayal leaves scars even when battles are won. Trust doesn't return overnight. And love doesn't erase the past. It only dares us to build something new in spite of it. That night, I tucked the boys into bed, their small fingers tangled in mine, their eyes finally peaceful. Ryan lingered in the doorway watching us, and when our eyes met, there was no more silence, no more hesitation. Only the fragile, painful truth of two broken people trying to heal together. I don't know what the future will bring. Maybe Margaret will strike again. Maybe the shadows of the past will always haunt us. But I do know this: I am no longer the woman who walked into this house desperate for work, ready to disappear at the first sign of rejection. I am stronger. I am seen. And no one, not even Margaret, can erase that. If my story means anything, let it be this: betrayal may break you, but it also reveals who you are when the pieces fall. Sometimes the family you fight for is not the one you were born into, but the one you choose, the one that chooses you back. And sometimes the greatest revenge against those who try to erase you is simply refusing to vanish. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched your heart, if it made you reflect on love, betrayal, and the courage it takes to stand tall, please like this video, share it with someone who might need hope, subscribe for more stories like this, and tell me in the comments what family means to you.